So a while back I made this video on how to build a great villain, where I look at a few different movie bad guys and try to see what makes them so great. And to this day, I think it is a pretty useful video for anyone to watch. But one problem with it that I noticed recently is that it only discusses how to construct a villain throughout the whole movie, and this way inadvertently leaves out arguably the most important part of villain creation, the introduction. See, just like in real life, first impressions in film are king. If you want your movie bad guy to really stand out as something special, then the thing you have to do is unveil them on screen in a way that makes the audience instantly go, holy shit, and leaves an impression that lasts not only to the end of the movie, but until the end of time itself. And the question is, how do you do that? The simple answer is, just write an incredible introductory scene. Write a scene with our bad guy that successfully holds for 15 full minutes of tension and dread without ever breaking. Write a scene where the bad guy goes through a multi-layered mini arc stuffed with heart-pounding reveals and reversals. In other words, just be Quentin Tarantino. The issue is, most of us aren't Quentin Tarantino. Most of us will never be Quentin Tarantino. So then, what about us? Are we just kinda out of luck here? Are we destined to write mediocre, forgettable villains to join the ranks of Malekith and that one guy from that one Die Hard movie that isn't the first one? I mean, how can we ever aspire to introduce an antagonist as one of the all-time greats if we aren't allowed to build that antagonist up through their actions and choices before that introduction? Well, worry not, my insecure writer friend, because for us too, there is a way. A couple different ways, actually. A couple screenwriting hacks that work so well that you don't even have to be that talented to successfully use them. You can build your villain through your hero. You can build your villain through the aftermath of their actions. You can build your villain through pure good old hatred. And so, let's get into it. Let's take a look at a few different movies and even not movies to see how to unveil a bad guy in a way that makes them carve out a permanent spot in the audience's brain where they'll stay in some capacity forever. Here's how to introduce a villain. Firstly, even if you aren't able to build up your villain through their actions before the introduction, you can circumvent this restriction by building them up through the actions of the hero. And the first example I'd like to give is actually from a video game, because God of War on PS4 probably does this as effectively as can be done. In essence, in God of War you play as this buff dude Kratos, who is a god of, and in the beginning of the game, you head out to hunt with your boy, where you come across a bunch of different enemies that you have to fight. And while I'm sure there are video game reasons for all this, one of the main purposes story and character-wise here is to build up the core attribute of Kratos that makes him who he is, which is... Right, when we see Kratos take down this giant multiple times his size with his bare hands, that makes it very clear to us who and what he is. A brute force physical warrior. Out of all the mighty warriors across the realm, Kratos, without question, is an apex predator among them. That is his core attribute. And now that we've established that, we return home with the boy, and we are paid an introductory visit by the main villain, the Stranger. And at this point, we know absolutely nothing about the Stranger and frankly have no reason to even take him seriously. Mostly we're just concerned for his well-being because he's pissing off a guy 3 times his body mass we now know is an apex predator of brute force. The only way this can ever end for the Stranger is very badly. Until...
Fine. My turn.
What you just saw is one of the biggest holy moments in games and in movies I've had. And while I'm sure some of it comes from the fact that this dude punches you up into the clouds, the main reason is that at this moment we realize that Kratos' core attribute of being a brute force apex predator also applies to the Stranger, and possibly even more strongly so. With a single punch, all that 30 minutes of build-up we did for our hero transfers over to our villain. And that's why immediately we take the villain seriously. That's why immediately immediately the villain has made himself home inside our head. That's why immediately, at least for the time being, the villain has achieved greatness.
You little man. Get rid of him.
My turn.
Oh, what the Oh. This man's strong like me.
If you need a movie example of the same exact thing, you can look at Terminator 2, where we first establish Arnold as an unstoppable brute force, only for the T-1000 to then step in and wipe the floor with him. But another good... what? Okay. Another good movie example of this method is, believe it or not, Now You See Me Too. See, at the start of this movie, our hero group of magicians use their big brain, smooth-moving abilities to infiltrate this billion-dollar company press conference, which makes it very clear who they are, the apex predators of hustlers.
Hey there, buddy, smile. There you go.
What?
Who am I? It is picture day. Did Julie not tell you it's picture day?
Picture day? I'm full wash, not this guy's not full wash. And I'm full wash, not him.
It says here, Evans Mental Facility, Mark D. Stooge.
Hold on a second. I've never seen this before in my life, buddy.
They're smarter than you, more charismatic than you, more technologically savvy than you. Overall, for 20 minutes, the movie highlights how nobody else is even near their level of intelligence. Until...
He thinks really private.
Yeah, everything that he wants.
As the horsemen like to say, magic is about controlling perception. Do you recall the death of Jack Wilder?
He's actually right here. Biggest criminal of them all. FBI agent Dylan Rhodes.
Just like that, the hustlers have become the hustled. All the attributes of intelligence and charisma and tech savviness have now transferred over to this mysterious villain who has hijacked the show from them. And right away, it's like, oh shit. Who could have done this? Who could have beaten our heroes at their own unbeatable game? How the hell are we gonna ever defeat them? Questions typical to a great villain introduction. Hopefully you're starting to get what I'm saying, but one thing you have to keep in mind is that this method only works if your villain shares a core attribute with your hero. You can't mix and match. If you first establish Kratos as being a physical badass and then have the villain from Now You See Me Too show up to outsmart him, that achieves nothing. All it does is show us that our villain is smarter than our hero who has never been built up as being smart. In other words, nothing. But used correctly, this method can be very effective, and it's actually not limited to just the villain. You can use it to introduce other characters as well. You wanna introduce your hero off the back of some already established bad guy or whatever known entity, go for it. But now, let's move on to the next method that you can... Oh no, oh god, I'm being hacked by the infamous hacker group Anonymous we all know has been established to be the biggest, baddest hacker group out there. This is it, this is the end from... Who could have saved me? Who could have possibly been strong enough to stop Anonymous? Oh, it's Surfshark, who I've joined forces with for this video. Okay, listen, I'm sure at this point you've heard of VPNs from all your favorite YouTubers as well as their grandma, and for good reason. We just had a controversy of an app gathering all your private data and handing it out to a foreign government. We just had a government preventing you from using that app altogether just because it says so. And trust me when I tell you this, stuff like this is gonna get more frequent the further we go. And that's why you do need a VPN like Surfshark. Protect your information and passwords, don't get locked out of certain content just because it's not available in your region. You know the deal. But here's the real kicker as to why I'm telling you this. You go to the link in the description, you use code Filmento, and you'll get Surfshark right now for an 85% discount along with 3 extra months for free. That's under $2 per month. You're not gonna find a better deal than this in any place that isn't a scam or illegal. So just get it over with. Click the link below, get the #1 VPN out there right now, and never have to worry about this stuff again, and help this channel out in the process as well. But now, let's switch back from heroes to villains. Secondly, you can build up a villain before their actual introduction by having the hero experience the consequences of the villain's actions that most accurately personify who and what they are. Look at 7 for example. For a long period of 90 minutes, we follow our hero detectives Mills and Somerset as they encounter grossly mutilated victims of a single serial killer. We have a victim who was forced to eat spaghetti until they burst, another who was kept in torturing captivity for a full year, one that was humped to death with a...
Told me to
motherfucker. He made me do it. He put that thing on me.
All in all, the most central thing that becomes very apparent through all these victims is that whoever's behind all this clearly isn't all there. Like, whoever's doing this, they're not feeling the way humans should feel, they're not functioning the way humans should function, they're just not alright in the head in a way that normal sane humans should be. And then, after all that time searching through gruesome crime scenes and failing to catch whoever is responsible, the one responsible just catches himself.
Detective. After this, I'm gone.
No big surprise.
Detective! You're looking for me.
Memorable villains need memorable entrances. Welcome to WatchMojo.com.
John Doe showing up at the precinct and screaming for Mills and Somerset is one of the most chilling, memorable, shocking villain intros you'll find in any detective movie. And once again, some of the shock might come from the sheer surprise of it, but that's not the real reason behind it. The real main reason for why this introduction is so effective is because now all of a sudden all the evil we've experienced through our heroes before has taken a physical form. All those gross gut-wrenching scenes from earlier, this guy is responsible for. As in, even though we've never seen John Doe do anything, he still already has 90 minutes worth of actions building him up. And that's where the power of this introduction comes from. If John Doe just showed up at the beginning without us first having experienced his handiwork, I guarantee you we wouldn't still be talking about him.
If we catch John Doe and he turns out to be the devil, I mean, if he's Satan himself, that might live up to our expectations.
And also again, the reason I'm highlighting the insanity aspect of the murders we experience is because, kinda like was the case with the previous point, this method only works if the perpetrator immediately fits what has been perpetrated. Like, if you look at Saw, for example, you'll find a pretty similar effective shocking murder culprit introduction, you know, just a bit less subtle. But despite both of these movies featuring gross, gut-wrenching murder scenes and situations, at their core they build up to two very different villains. Jigsaw is someone who gives you a chance to learn something through manipulation, whereas John Doe is the kind of guy who forces you to eat spaghetti at gunpoint until you die. As in, Jigsaw's actions are manipulative and somewhat reasoned.
Most people are so ungrateful to be alive, but not you. Not anymore.
John Doe's actions are forced and just bat insane.
It didn't work out. So, I took a souvenir. Her pretty head and the life of the baby inside of her.
And so, if you try to swap these introductions around, if you had John Doe at the end stand up in the police morgue as one of the very first found victims, that just wouldn't function, because the introduction wouldn't match what came before. It would be a carefully orchestrated payoff to a build-up that was based entirely on the dog mentality of chasing whatever new tire is closest. To give you an example that isn't hypothetical, look at Now You See Me 2 again. The conference hijacking can also be viewed as an experienced action instead of a real introduction, and it does do a great job of building up to a highly intelligent, intimidating opponent. But then when we actually go meet this opponent, it's nothing like that.
Would you like to know, my friends, just how I got you here?
We know how you did it.
No, you don't.
Yeah, you stole our files for the show, then obviously hypnotized us.
No, seriously,
The strobe was a combo of binaural beats.
Yeah, turns out that the big brain big bad is just an insecure goofball that immediately gets bullied and outwitted by our heroes. And just like that, all the build-up made through our prior experiences is gone, because there's simply no way to believe that this person and the person behind those experiences are the same. To be clear, you can play with assumptions and give your villain depth that doesn't necessarily get revealed in the intro all at once. But still, you have to introduce them in a way that we are able to view them as the perpetrator behind whatever it is we've seen or even heard having been perpetrated. Build-up only works when it builds up to something. The third way you can find a permanent place for your villain in the audience's head is to introduce them with an action so despicable and unforgivable that the audience will immediately hate them with all their strength, which, if done properly, can be very, very effective. To highlight what I'm talking about, look at Bourne Supremacy. The movie begins with this CIA deal gone wrong, where we get our initial introduction to our main Russian asset villain, Kirill.
your shots.
And honestly, there's really nothing special about this intro, and all this guy ultimately ends up being is yet another bad guy born asset in an endless list of bad guy born assets. That is until we then move over to Bourne and his girlfriend from the first movie, Marie. At this point, Bourne has made a decision to leave his old life behind with Marie, but all of a sudden he becomes hunted by Kirill, which ultimately leads to the first big action that Kirill in this movie makes.
We don't have a choice.
Yes, you do.
With a single shot of a rifle that kills Marie, this forgettable bad guy born asset rises up to become something much more. Because suddenly we don't view him as just another born asset, but instead as the guy who killed Marie. You know, Marie who we learned to care about in the first movie. Marie who we now know means a lot to Bourne. An action deliberately designed to make Bourne and us hate him. And obviously the strength of this hatred will vary based on whether you've seen the first movie and whether you actually care about Marie, but you get the point. By killing Marie, the person Bourne cares about, the villain becomes personal. And it's this personal hatred toward Kirill that motivates not only Bourne to go on his journey, but also us to stick by Bourne on his journey. It motivates us to sit through this movie from beginning to end. See, Bourne also has other intentions and destinations that we don't really understand until we get to them, which usually would get confusing and turn off from the movie. But in this case, it's not the case, because we are so locked in on getting back at Kirill for what he did. Until Kirill is dealt with, we are not satisfied, we are not done, whether that means getting revenge or learning to grow past revenge. And that's how powerful of a narrative tool hatred can be that in a gritty reality simulator or a comic book movie. The downside to this introduction method is that it might be the most difficult one on this list to pull off, because in order for it to work, you've already had to establish such a strong bond between your hero and someone close to them that breaking that bond actually hurts, which, depending on how early you introduce your villain, can be quite difficult. Take the beginning of Rogue Nation, for example. Solomon Lane executing this junior agent might look pretty strong, but the problem is that we know nothing about her. She doesn't have any kind of relationship with Ethan Hunt, so it doesn't really do anything. Using random people can be effective in showing how far characters are willing to go in terms of their choices, but they don't really convert to effective emotion-based introductions. The easiest way to use this method, I'd say, is if you have a franchise with already established characters, like Thanos introducing himself with the act of killing Loki, which motivates Thor to go on his journey of revenge, as well as us to follow him on that journey. Or like even in that new Last of Us PS4 game. I won't go into spoilers because it is still new, but let's just say that our villain Abby does something in the beginning that ruffled the feathers of gamers all around the globe.
What is happening? I gave her the benefit of the doubt. What in the is this? Oh god!
So much so that people were going after Abby before the game was even out. Obviously later on the game then goes a bit different direction with this in terms of Abby being the villain, but the situation as a whole is an apt case study of the sheer emotional power you can mine by basing the introduction of your villain in hatred. All that said, maybe there still are more villain introduction hacks you know of, and if so, please share them in the comments. But if not, you now have a couple different alternatives to try. Also, if you guys don't have a VPN yet, go check out Surfshark in the link below and help the channel out in the process. Or maybe you unveil yourself as my new hated personal villain.